Today is Friday, December 13th, and today's agricultural fact of the day also came from agdaily.com. And this article popped up and I instantly thought, oh no, not again. Highly pathogenic avian influenza was discovered at an Iowa poultry farm with 4.5 million hens, which is a Michael Foods third-party egg-laying facility in Iowa. They have lost 12% of its egg supply after millions of chickens were exposed to avian influenza and were unalived. The method for management of avian influenza on a premise is to entirely depopulate all birds on the premise, regardless of the status of infection. In 2024, the virus has caused approximately 26 million egg-laying hens to be unalived nationwide. This has been a key driver behind egg price volatility. If you are a new follower, because I know that I've gotten a lot of new followers in the last week or so, avian influenza, HPAI specifically, has been an issue for the agricultural industry and the poultry industry since January of 2022. And this is the standard method when we're talking about infection in poultry specifically, is that the state Department of Animal Health will come in and unalive all of those birds. There was a place local to us in Rochester that had a little over 400 birds that had gotten an infection. It was sometime back in I feel like it was April or May 2022. I used it as a class example way back when. But they entirely documented the entire process. Unfortunately, that farm had a lot of show quality, specific special breeds of chickens. So it wasn't like it was just your standard egg layer. These birds had a lot of value to them. Now, in instances such as the one that's highlighted in today's agricultural fact, that farm does get compensation for those birds, but unfortunately, it's usually not to the entirety of that bird's value. Now, there were questions on a couple of the videos that I've posted across different platforms. Someone had asked about when birds are identified, how is that process carried out? Now, it's not like they're just going to the heads off of these birds. Typically, to my understanding, again, I'm just a lowly ag teacher. I don't do that for a living. I'm not a state vet or a state vet tech, but they come in and they utilize gases to carry out that job. And typically those carcasses are then decomposed in some manner. There has also been discussion because last week there was an ag fact that I posted about avian influenza in dairy cattle and in dairy cattle producing raw milk that is marketed and not pasteurized specifically out in California. And although depopulation is the common method for poultry, to my understanding, they're not just going and depopulating herds of cattle. Last week, when I read that fact about that dairy farm, Raw Foods Inc. LLC or whatever out in California, they put a quarantine on all products and animals, which means that no animals could leave the farm because obviously they're trying to mitigate the chance of transmission. There have been links of cases of avian influenza in humans, particularly those that are working in close contact with animals that may potentially be infected. But in that instance with the raw milk, it could have potentially been a much larger scale. Now with chickens, again, if you've never seen any of my facts pertaining to avian influenza, basically you go out one day and your birds are fine, and then you go out the next day and they're very ill. So some individuals say, how do I know if I've gotten avian influenza in my flock of birds, my egg layers? It's pretty apparent because you start losing significant amount of birds, and not like coccidiosis where it kind of is a gradual thing. It will literally happen one day they're fine, the next day they're not. I do not believe that there have been cases linked to egg consumption. I don't think that people have gotten it from egg consumption. But with chickens and with a lot of these other types of illnesses that have occurred with HPAI, it is through fecal transmission, I believe. So when dairy cows get it, it's because whatever wild birds in their environment are depositing fecal material and those cows are then consuming it, and then that's how they contract it. to my understanding. There's also some sort of potential contamination with milking equipment. But what I'm hypothesizing and envisioning on a large scale facility such as this is that they do something, plumbing in some type of gas into the ventilation system in order to depopulate on a larger scale. So in that case that I mentioned in Rochester, New York, they were using, it was like plastic 55-gallon drums. They literally recorded the entire thing. So I'm sure that if you look it up, Avian Influenza, Rochester, New York, I can't remember the name of the farm. Give me 1 second. I spent a few seconds searching it and I can't remember the farm name for the life of me, but I'm sure that if I spent a little bit more time, I probably could find it. I just don't have time to give right now. But when they did it in that scenario, the state veterinarians or vet techs showed up. They had the Tyvek suits on, the masks, the whole nine, and they had plastic 55-gallon drums that they would plumb a gas in that took out this task very quickly and seemingly pretty painlessly, as painless as it can be. And there was an article that I read a few years ago when this initially became a larger scale thing. One of the large scale poultry farms did, after this had to be carried out on their farm, when it comes to decomposing or composting those carcasses, the residents in the surrounding area were complaining about a foul odor, because if you're talking about hundreds of thousands or millions of birds, it's going to get smelly. Anyway, that's it for the egg fact of the day. We had a snow day yesterday, so hopefully you learned something. And hopefully I get through this Friday the 13th without anything life-shattering happening.